Why is it that I always have fucked up camera views? And why is there Batman socks in this?
Because you're welcome. Okay, thanks for that.
Anyway, hello Jacksonites, and welcome to Super Kaiju Binge episode 6. And welcome to my newest review of one of my favorite Godzilla movies of the entire franchise. There ain't going to be no sugarcoating this one. Today I will be discussing, along with Ryan from Kaiju Network, make yourself known.
Hello.
1955's Godzilla Raids Again. So the backstory on this one is very, very, very simple. Toho was high and drunk at the same time off the success of the original Godzilla. The original Godzilla was a gigantic success in Japan, so of course Toho was immediately thinking, more. So they immediately greenlit a sequel, and 5 months after the original Godzilla came out, came Godzilla Raids Again in April of 1955. Oh yeah.
I thought Godzilla came out in the 30s.
That was King Kong. So yeah, this one is even more of a quickie sequel than Son of Kong. For those of you who don't know, Son of Kong, the original King Kong was released in I know that February, I believe, of 1933, and Son of Kong came out in December of 1933. The original Godzilla came out November 3rd, 1954. Godzilla Raids Again was released April 24th, 1955. Now, I'm not exactly sure if this means that it was a success. This movie made 170 million yen in its box office run when it was initially released. So I don't know if this movie was a huge success or it was a massive downgrade. But yeah, this movie very much so embodies the phrase quickie sequel, and it made maybe the most quickie sequel ever. At least in terms of Japanese movies that I've heard of. This movie is fucking rushed. But ironically, I like this movie way more than Son of Kong. And I like this movie way more than most people give it credit for. So Ryan, why don't you jump into your personal history with this film?
I mean, I don't remember exactly the first time I saw it, but I have it on one of the classic media releases. I watched Gigantus a long time ago, and I never saw the Japanese one. Now that I'm thinking about it, it was only like 2 or 3 years ago, but I always had kind of fond memories of this one, and I always got a lot of enjoyment watching it. It was one of the few Showa movies that I was like, you know what, I'm purposely going to watch this. For a long time at least. So it is one of the earlier ones I saw, probably like the first 10, I would say, those years ago.
Well, my personal history with Godzilla Raids Again. Growing up as a Godzilla fan, this one kind of always stuck out to me from the rest of the series for a few reasons. It was the only other film in the franchise, aside from the original, that was in black and white. I knew that Anguirus was Godzilla's best friend of the entire series, but I did know he started out as being a rival to Godzilla, and that always intrigued me. I always wondered, how would that go down? And I would see images and clips of this movie, and it really got me intrigued. So, as I mentioned with the last Godzilla review, my stepmom bought me the OG Godzilla collection from the Toho Master Collection, I'll call it. And I believe this was the third Godzilla movie of that box set that I watched. The first one that I watched was, spoilers, Godzilla Raids Again. Then after that was Invasion of the Astro Monster, and then I decided to sit down and give this a watch. And I'm not going to lie, I was actually very pleasantly surprised. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie, and I thought it was a fun time. It kept me entertained, and I just really enjoyed it. And it kind of stuck with me like that for quite a while. Then I got older and I started researching the film, and I discovered, oh, Jesus Christ, this movie is a quick, rushed ass movie. But that never really took anything away from it for me. And I kept rewatching the movie, and it just kept growing and growing and growing and growing on me. And I would see the fan reaction from this movie, and I see this pop up on top 10 worst Godzilla movie lists all the time. I've read so many posts saying that Raids Again is one of their least favorite of the entire franchise. I can understand why for quite a few reasons. And if you don't really like this movie, hey, that's your thing. And it really wasn't until the last couple of years when I finally just realized, I think this might be one of my favorites of the whole series. And that still reigns true to this day. I consider Godzilla Raids Again maybe not one of my all-time favorite monster movies in general, but I do consider it to be one of my favorite Godzilla movies, which is so strange because this movie objectively is pretty bad. It's rushed. It's kind of poorly made. It's really short. It's a massive cash grab. It's a massive copycat. This kind of has all the recipes this kind of has the recipe for disaster scribbled all over it. But no matter how many times I watch it, I still really do like Godzilla Raids Again. And so, I'm just going to say it. I do consider this to be one of my favorite Godzilla movies. I think it's one of the top 5 most underrated installments of the entire Godzilla franchise. That being said, I do agree that this movie does have problems, and it's not a perfect film by any stretch of the imagination. So with all that being said, anything else you want to add before we jump into the plot?
I don't know if the calculations were exactly right, but the box office that I found had it a little over half the original.
Oh, so it was kind of like almost exactly like a Son of Kong situation. It's really amazing how many unintentional parallels there are between the Godzilla and Kong franchise, especially when the two started out. King Kong was a big hit. Godzilla was a big hit. Son of Kong was rushed as all living shit, and Godzilla Raids Again is rushed as all living shit. Son of Kong didn't make a whole lot of money, and Godzilla Raids Again didn't make a whole lot of money. Strange. But anyway, so let's jump into the plot. The plot of Raids Again is extremely simple. It really is kind of just a point A to point B type story. There's no ifs, ands, or buts between it. 2 pilots played by Shoichi Tsukioka and Koji Kobayashi. Tsukioka being played by the very first appearance of Hiroshi Koizumi in the Godzilla franchise, and Kobayashi being played by Minoru Chiaki, are hunting for schools of fish for a tuna cannery company in Osaka. Kobayashi's plane malfunctions and is forced to land near Iwato Island. I'm going to be kind of keeping a track record of all the islands in the Godzilla franchise, so this is island number 2. Tsukioka lands to pick up Kobayashi, and the two encounter Godzilla and a quadruped monster fighting next to them and fall off the cliff into the ocean within the first 5 minutes of the film. Tsukioka and Kobayashi fly back to Osaka, and they report their findings to the authorities and find out that the quadruped monster is a mutated ankylosaur named Anguirus, whose species had an ancient rivalry with Godzilla's species. Dr. Kyohei Yamane, once again played by Takashi Shimura, who of course experienced Godzilla's attack back in 1954, confirms that this is indeed a second member of Godzilla species and is indeed the second Godzilla, and that both monsters were likely reanimated by hydrogen bomb tests. With conventional weapons already established to be unable to kill Godzilla, Dr. Yamane simply suggests that they use flares to lure Godzilla away if he was to ever make surface, stating that if he was to see flares, it would give him flashbacks to the hydrogen bomb tests, which I actually really like that about his character, about Godzilla's character. Godzilla arrives on the shore of Osaka, and while a blackout of all city lights is in force, the JASDF jets use flares to lead Godzilla away from shore. This actually works, and Godzilla pursues the flares, leaving the shore. Meanwhile, a prison truck transporting criminals to another part of the country, and the convicts stage a riot and hijack the truck after a lengthy chase with the police. And after this, the truck crashes into an industrial building and starts a massive fire. The fire attracts Godzilla back to the shore, and moments after landing, the JSDF starts raining fire upon him, and this also attracts Anguirus, who emerges from the water and begins to attack Godzilla. And thus starts the very first monster fight of the entire Godzilla series. Well, first big monster fight. They did show them fighting at the beginning of the film, but the first time two monsters ever lock claws in a Japanese city commences, which lasts about 10 minutes and is easily, debatably the best part of the film. And as the monsters fight, the convicts attempt to escape, but drown when the subway that they escape into is flooded. And after a lengthy battle, Godzilla kills Anguirus and returns to the ocean. Kind of anticlimactically. Kobayashi is transferred to a Hokkaido plant, and during a company party, Tsukioka and Hidemi, who come to visit, and Kobayashi are notified that Godzilla destroyed one of the company fishing boats. The military and Tsukioka begin a massive search for Godzilla, and Tsukioka spots him swimming to the shore of a small icy island, which is kind of implied to be the first island at the beginning of the movie, but I don't think it is. I never thought it was. He notifies the cannery, and Kobayashi takes off in his plane to switch shifts with Tsukioka. I'm also not going to count this island as the repertoire of islands throughout the Godzilla series, mostly because it's not named. So you could just say it's an island that's next to Hokkaido. I just want to get that out of the way. He notifies the cannery, and Kobayashi takes off in his plane, and Tsukioka, who has transferred to the Air Force, travels on a jet with an old friend, played by the very first appearance with Yoshio Tsuchiya as Tajima in his first appearance in the Godzilla series. They drop bombs on Godzilla, but they are unsuccessful in thwarting him in any which way, shape, or form. He wades toward the shore, and Kobayashi is killed while trying to distract Godzilla from returning to the ocean. Tsukioka is devastated, but realizes that the military can shoot missiles at the mountain and causing Godzilla to be buried in an icy avalanche. The jets fire missiles and bury Godzilla in snow and ice, thus not killing this Godzilla, but defeating and subduing him, thus ending the film. Yeah, like I said, this movie's plot is very, very, very simple. So, what about this story for you, Ryan?
I mean, it's a pretty simple, but I say it has a lot of unique elements that I guess I'll get to in my pros. But generally, it was fun.
Well, of course, it wouldn't be Jacksonite Productions video if I didn't have some burp fuel. I heard that. Just fucking shitting yourself all in there. So what do I think of this movie story? Yes, it's very simple, and it's also very derivative of the original Godzilla. This movie story is pretty much almost as simple and... What? Oh. This is pretty much the Beast on 20,000 Fathoms version of the original Godzilla story. It takes all the interesting subplots and fluff that the first movie had, strips it away, and just makes it a generic 1950s atomic monster movie. Like, this is as close to the American monster movie formula as the Godzilla series ever got, and it definitely suffers from that. But at the same time, at least they didn't do a 100% complete copycat of the original film story, because if they did that, I don't think I would like this movie nearly as much as I do. So yeah, the movie is very simple, and it has a very simple story, and there are a lot of elements that feel very similar to the original Godzilla, and the movie story at the same time also feels very rushed. But I still do like the film story. It does feature a little bit more Godzilla world building. It expands upon the character a little bit, and I like that they do establish that this is for sure indeed a second Godzilla. There's no ambiguity about, well, maybe Godzilla was resurrected from the first movie, which is kind of what I thought for a little bit. But no, there is dialogue that strongly confirms that this is indeed a second Godzilla, so I like that. But overall, this movie story, it's not bad. Obviously, it could have been better, but for what it is, I don't think it's bad at all. So what are your pros?
Okay, so the first one I think that I noticed was the score.
Oh yeah.
I actually enjoyed it more than the first film, if I'm being totally honest. The main theme, I like it a lot. But also, like, a lot of this stuff where, not just when Godzilla shows up, but, like, any kind of big moment in the movie, there's this, like, really, like, dark-sounding, like, piano. And it kind of just has a very creepy, almost horror feel. And I really enjoyed that. So, yeah, score, soundtrack, whatever you want to call it. I really
Masaru
like that.
Sato. Masaru Sato.
Yeah, it was good. The next pro that I have, I said the structure of the film was cool, where the fight was in the second act instead. And it's like 40 minutes into the movie or something. And just the structure of the film, how the third act isn't the fight, like, for once. Well, I guess not for once. It was the first time they did a fight, but you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And then the ending was sort of this unique kind of thing where they had him buried and all that. So I thought the structure was pretty cool. I like the designs, Godzilla and Anguirus. Probably my favorite for Anguirus, honestly. Godzilla, it's probably my top 5. It just looks better than the original, in my opinion. I like the humans. Legitimately, I do. They're not like outstanding, but I sort of care about them, and the human stuff doesn't bother me at all. And Tsukioka and Kobayashi, like, you actually kind of get to know them. You're like, oh, you can tell that they're friends. So it's kind of sad when he dies. Just the monster action in general in both. Godzilla's come to the shore, the initial fight, which is also something I totally forgot about. They had an initial little conflict. Then the main event, obviously, and then the end. All that stuff was pretty entertaining. And I said the finale, just as kind of a unique finale compared to the other movies. I thought it was interesting, at least. So I think that's all 6 of them.
Okay. So let's see. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 7 pros. Pro number 1 is I like the cast. There is no real standout character in this movie to talk about. They all kind of just blend together as the first good kaiju cast overall. Because, like we said last time, I don't really think the human characters are that strong in the first Godzilla movie. They serve the story, but just as individuals, I don't think they're that great, except for Dr. Serizawa. Now, of course, Akihiko Hirata is not in this movie, so we're missing that. And there are a lot of newcomers in Japanese cinema in this movie, but there's a lot of first appearances of future Toho actors. Most notably, of course, being Hiroshi Koizumi, who I've stated multiple times is my favorite of Toho's classic actors. And of course, there's Yoshio Tsuchiya, who went on to be the most eccentric of Toho's actors. But yeah, I like the characters. They're not especially noteworthy, but they're just a fun cast of characters. They're overall pretty good spirited, even though there's a little bit of sadness and conflict in the third act of the film, but that's when Kobayashi's killed off. But that's understandable.
They feel human.
Huh?
So they feel genuinely human.
Yeah, they feel more human. Like you can connect with these characters more. And also the acting is much better in this movie than in the first as well. Because like I said, a lot of the characters, they had either just wooden chemistry or deadpan facial expressions or deadpan acting. Here, the acting is much more lively and energetic, so you connect with these characters a lot more. And you certainly do buy the chemistry between Hiroshi Koizumi and Minoru Chiaki as characters. Like, you buy these two as best buds. And also you buy, not 100%, but you definitely do buy Hiroshi Koizumi's romance with the main female character in this movie. They just do come off like they genuinely care about each other, which is nice. Now, I should also say that this movie was not directed by Ishiro Honda. Ishiro Honda was off busy making one of his own movies, or one of his other movies. He was directing Love Makeup, which is about two lovers who reunite after being separated by World War II. So Ishiro Honda did not return to make this movie. This movie is directed by Motoyoshi Oda, and this, I think, might have been one of his last movies that he ever directed. I could be wrong, but I think it was. You can definitely not tell that this is this is not an Ishiro Honda movie. You can very easily tell that. And that's not necessarily a problem, but I think that's another reason why this movie's cast feels a little bit more unique. They don't feel really Ishiro Honda at all. But overall, I like this movie's cast. They're fun, they're witty, they're lighthearted, they feel more human. You connect with them more, and they're more energetic and lively. Pro number 2 is the score. This is also the first Godzilla movie to not be scored by Akira Ifukube. This will be the last one to not be scored by Akira Ifukube for quite a while. This was the very first Godzilla movie to be scored by a very, very famous Japanese music composer, Masaru Sato, who wasn't necessarily a light version of Akira Ifukube. I don't think you should compare Masaru Sato and Akira Ifukube at all. I would just consider Masaru Sato to be his own thing. Though there is another music composer that I'll get to later down the series that I will be comparing to Masaru Sato. You probably know who that is, but just bear with me. We'll get there when we get there. But Masaru Sato is an excellent film composer. He scored a lot of really good Toho movies, and this, of course, was his first. Though I don't know. I don't know if he did Half Human, which came out the same year as this. But this is his first film, or not his first, it was his first Godzilla movie. It's not his best. I will say that. This is not Masaru Sato's best Godzilla score. But I do think this is his most underrated, because there's a lot of really good tracks in this film. But also at that same time, this may be his most subdued Godzilla score, because there's a lot of moments in this movie where there's not very many music. I'll get to that in just a minute. But when there is music, it's really good. The main theme that Ryan was talking about is really, really, really good. It's really creepy. It's really ominous. It's really ominous and suspenseful. It kind of just feels like a big foreboding sense of doom. Why?
Foreboding.
I said foreboding
You
with
said
a D.
foreboding.
I'm gonna get that ass. You better watch it. You stink.
I didn't even fart.
Why is it salty? Anyway, so yeah, I like this movie score. There are moments when it's really, really dark and ominous and almost scary. And it's also exciting when it needs to be, especially towards the end of the movie. So overall, while not Masaru Sato's best Godzilla score, it is his first. I think you should cut him a little bit of slack because I do think that this... Now you got my fans to call it foreboning. Thanks.
Foreboding.
That's not what it's called.
That's what you said.
My wife, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, so yeah, I like this movie score. It's not bad. It's his first, so cut him some slack. Masaru Sato will definitely get better on the franchise. Mechagodzilla 74 foreshadowing. Pro number 3 is the eerie quiet scenes. I mean, let's talk about this. There's a lot... Oh, fuck. Now you got Ryan calling it foreboning.
Foreboding, yes.
He calls it foreboner. What the fuck? Is this our next That's a Lot of Fish gag?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna go and every time you make a video, I'm gonna just comment that the whole time until it ends. For boner.
Not if I put you in timeout.
For boner.
I'm really biting my tongue right now.
I'll make Solo do it too. Actually, never mind. That's a joke. We're just gonna have a for boner party.
Anyway, as I was saying...
I agree with that, but I forgot to mention that some of that shit, the fight scenes, there's like no music. It's pretty creepy.
Yeah, all the scenes with all the scenes, usually I think it's in the first half of the film, there's a lot of eerie quiet moments. Now, D-Man 1954, whom honestly I really can't stand, he says this is the number one worst Godzilla movie of the entire franchise, which I highly disagree with. He said that his biggest problem with this movie is the lack of music and all the quiet scenes in this movie. I think he misses the point. I believe that was done intentionally to both convey a sense of doom and a little bit of realism, but also to kind of give Japanese audiences a bit of a throwback to what it felt like during all of the air raids during World War II, and to not necessarily like compare it to that, but to give you a similar feeling of what the situation would be like. All the blackouts and the air raid sirens, or even just the sounds of planes flying overhead, you just hear nothing else but that. So you know that shit's coming. So I like all the quiet scenes. They definitely do set a tone for this film's atmosphere during the monster scenes, and I think it's really good. I think it's kind of clever on the filmmaker's part. Pro number 4 is Anguirus. This, of course, being the very first monster of the other than Godzilla of the entire franchise that's introduced, and I do think that they started off strong. Anguirus, I've always considered to be one of the most underrated Toho monsters of all time. I absolutely adore Anguirus. He's one of my favorite Toho monsters. He's just one of my favorite monsters in general of all time. And I really think it's a shame that there was a lot of opportunities for Anguirus to show up later in future Toho movies, and he just always could never just catch a break, except for Final Wars, which is great, but it's just feel like it's a little bit too little, too late, in my opinion. Anyway, So yeah, I love Anguirus in this movie. I love his design. I love his roar. And he definitely does look like a good first adversary for Godzilla. And
Yeah.
the only thing that I don't absolutely love about Anguirus is that he kind of is just a bit of a generic atomic monster. He doesn't have any special abilities aside from just being a giant monster. He just feels very generic. The only thing that is unique about him is his design and his roar. Godzilla has his atomic breath and his appearance and his roar, but Anguirus has a cool roar and a cool design. He's just kind of generic. But again, I think for those people who criticize this movie pretty harshly, I think that you should keep in mind that this movie in some ways was an experiment piece in and of itself. Like this was the first, for one thing, this was the first monster movie sequel. This was the first time that they incorporated multiple monsters in one movie. And I think that this is the first time, well, I don't think, this is the first time we ever had a monster fight in the franchise. So I think you should still cut this movie some slack. This will lead me into the next pro, which is pro number 5, is the monster fight. The first fight at the beginning is okay. It kind of just reminds me of Gamera and Barragan's first fight in Gamera versus Barragan. It's very, though it's not that slow. It's very experimental. It's very quick, but it's just a lot of biting and scratching and smashing into each other. But the second fight of the movie I think, is very, very entertaining. There's a lot of animalistic biting and scratching and shoving and smashing each other into buildings and kind of facing off with each other, because animals will do that a lot. They'll like kind of stand off and try to make each other look larger to their adversary to scare off their foe. And when that doesn't work, then they resort to hand-to-hand combat. So they do that a lot. Now, granted, the scenes where the monsters like move around at sped up footage, that was a flaw because they recorded it at normal speed, but then when they played it back, it was slightly faster. So that was a mistake, but I think that actually worked to their advantage because it made the fight look that much more nasty and animalistic, which is really good. This isn't really a special kind of Heisei era of Ultraman type fight. This is the first monster fight that we've ever seen. And they start off the series strong and they keep it simple. This is a very simple fight. This is the closest that Godzilla ever comes to fighting like King Kong in the entire franchise. Godzilla barely uses his atomic breath. I think he uses it only twice against Anguirus. He fires it once at Anguirus at the beginning, and then he fires it the second time to set Anguirus on fire. Other than that, it's just nothing but fighting tooth and nail and tail. And I think that's really cool. It's not my favorite monster fight of all time, but for the first monster fight of the entire series, it's good.
You could have that awesome drink. I'm going to open it now.
Okay, I'll drink that right now.
I'm going to go. I'll be back.
Where are you going?
I'm going to see you eat some tea.
Okay.
Jeff, they're getting tea. I'll be back. Go out the door.
I love you. Anyway, so, yeah, I like the monster fights. Pro number 6 is the finale to this movie. I think is very fun. I think this is one of the most unique endings to a monster movie where they don't kill the monster, they just subdue him. And they don't use any kind of special device or weapon to subdue the monster. It's just the power of ingenuity to subdue a monster. They just bury him in ice and snow. I think that's really clever. I don't know if they did that just as a way to literally keep Godzilla on ice so that maybe they could use him for a future Godzilla movie. I don't know that for sure. I kind of tend to doubt it because they weren't thinking sequel all the time like Hollywood is now. But if that's what they were doing, I got to give Toho some credit. I think that was really clever. Like, maybe they had some ideas for future Godzilla movies, but well, I know they did because there was the Bride of Godzilla plan, but that never came to fruition. And I think that was meant to be the end of the series. But I think maybe Toho just wanted to wait and to see if there was demand for another Godzilla movie. So they just kept Godzilla on ice. And of course, 7 years later, there would be, with one of my least favorite Godzilla movies of the entire series.
Well,
And the final pro number 7, is the special effects. We all know the main problem with the effects, but we'll talk about that later. So looking past that, I still think the effects are pretty decent. That's the best that I think they are. They're decent. The miniature sets, I still think look pretty good. They look well detailed. They look well crafted. They definitely look cheaper, but they look good for what this movie is. The monster suits, I actually have a new theory on Godzilla's design. Now, I can't remember the name of this Godzilla design. It's the, let me look it up real quick. Or I don't even need to do that. Hang on with me. The Gyakushu Goji suit. The Gyakushu Goji suit.
what do you mean?
I mean, aside from Ryan, I think he stated that this is one of his favorite Godzilla designs. It's not one of my favorites, I'll admit, but I do think it's good for what it is because it kind of plays into a theory that I have. Now, you could kind of state this as duh because the context of the film, we're assuming this takes place in 1955, not long after the first movie, which we can assume took place in 1954. So in the context of the film's continuity, let's just say there's a year between. So my theory is that the reason why Godzilla looks so much slimmer, because that is a very common complaint that people have with this design, is that Godzilla looked really big and bulky in the first film to convey his size, which works in the context of that film. But they criticize this suit, and it makes Godzilla look much more slender and thin and not as imposing or threatening as the original Godzilla. My theory for this is because this is kind of a fresh new Godzilla. He's still kind of developing his muscle mass and his frame into his new body. So that's why I think Godzilla looks kind of warped and disfigured in this movie, is that he's still kind of a brand new monster. You can make your argument about Anguirus for the reason why he looks like that is because of that too. But I never really got that sense with Anguirus. I think Anguirus just naturally looked like that, but looks a bit different because of the mutation, but his base form was still the same. Godzilla looks so warped and slim and slender in this movie because he's kind of a fresh Godzilla. So that's my theory for why the Gyakushu Goji suit looks like that in the context of the film. But we all know the reason why this movie is this suit is as slim and slender as it is because the filmmakers wanted to give Haruo Nakajima a break and make it much easier for him to engage in a much more physical Godzilla performance, which I support because this movie's suit was made with, I'm assuming, very similar materials to the second suit that they used for the original Godzilla movie. And if they knew that if they made it the exact same way, it would give Haruo Nakajima an even bigger problem. So they said, cut out the arms, cut out the legs, cut out the neck, and cut out the chest. Just make it much more easier for him to move around in this thing. So I do support that. And also, this was still very early in the Godzilla series, and this was the first time a monster fight had been incorporated, so they still hadn't really thought to do what they would do later in Godzilla movies, is that they would have Haruo Nakajima very involved with the design process, and they would have him wear the suit, and they'd have him move around, and he would say, patch this hole up here, stretch this material out here so I can move my arms, or make this material a little looser so I can bend and move my legs. That's what they would have Haruo Nakajima do later in the franchise, but they didn't do that here. So they just made a cheap suit, literally probably threw it together in an afternoon just to give Godzilla a suit. That being said, however, still, aside from that, the special effects, I think, are pretty decent. A lot of the green screen effects, or not green screen, but the composite shots, they look like composite shots, but I don't think they're that bad. I think they just used a lot of the same technology from the first movie, so they don't look terrible. The miniature sets are well made. They look kind of cheap. They look great when they're destroyed. The Osaka castle looks fantastic. The model that they had for that looks really, really, really good, in my opinion. It's very well detailed and well constructed. And when that thing gets crumpled to dust, it looks fantastic. The optical effects for Godzilla's atomic breath look okay, but there's a lot of times where it's clearly an optical effect. But again, this was early in the Godzilla series, so it's understandable. What?
I don't remember any effects like they did in the original. I'm pretty sure this time they just did the same spray mist.
Well, they also did that too. There was a couple optical effects for Godzilla's atomic breath in the first Godzilla movie, but for the most part, they just conveyed it by having the Godzilla puppet have a nozzle in its mouth, and it would just spew a mist of water. But on screen, it looks like hot atomic breath. And they do the same thing here. But there's a couple more shots where you can tell that it's an optical effect for Godzilla's atomic breath. They showcase them more in the second half of the film. But they look all right for how rushed this movie was. I think they look fine. Overall, the special effects, they're decent. That's the best that they can be. Oh, and let me finish up on the designs. Yeah, the Gyakushu Goji suit, it's not my favorite, but I like it for what it is. And I like that it looks so different to convey that they want to firmly establish that this is indeed the second Godzilla. This is Godzilla 2.0. So I like that about it. And of course, Anguirus' design, it's prototype Anguirus, but the suit itself, I think, is pretty well constructed, in my opinion. Overall, the effects are decent. They're clearly rushed. We'll get to that in a minute, but they're not bad for what they are. So with all that out of the way, what are your pros, Ryan? Or not pros, cons, excuse me.
All right, so the first one I have is the rush effects, which you kind of mentioned. It's just kind of, I know you said it needs some more animalistic, but at the same time, the problem that I have with it is like when in the same sequence you'll have normal speed effects and then you'll have the slow down effects, and it just looks sloppy. The next one, I said Dr. Yamane because he's kind of in the beginning, and you're like, oh, cool. It's connected to the original, and he's kind of in here, and then he just disappears. Like, he never comes back, I don't think.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Because I remember him being one of my favorite parts of the first one, and I feel like he could have had a bigger role in this one, but they never carried him over well enough. And for as much as I do like the finale, I think it's a little drawn out. Like, I think they take a little too long burying him in ice. Some of those scenes and shots drag a little long. But, I mean, those are really the only, cons that I can think of.
So it's like, what, 2 or 3?
3.
3, okay. Well, let's see. I have more than that. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 cons. So, yeah, as much as I love this movie, I do think this movie's got some problems. But I already talked about one of them. I'll just get... Con number 1 is that, yes, Anguirus is a very bland monster. And again, this is the closest that the Toho franchise feels to King Kong, in that Anguirus is only here just to give Godzilla something to fight. And a lot of King Kong monsters are only there just to give Kong something to fight. But so that's all I'll say about Anguirus in a negative way, is that he does feel very bland and he feels like a King Kong monster. But con number 2 is that I think this movie is too short by maybe about 5 minutes. It's 80 minutes long. And I think if they just had a little, like 5 minutes more worth of footage, I would have said, okay, it's rushed, so I could understand this movie being so short. But I still think this movie is just a tad bit too short. And that's another way that makes this movie feel very rushed. And that'll lead me into con number 3 is that, whoa, this movie is rushed. We're not even talking about the effects, so let's just ignore that for the moment. But this movie's structure and pace is very rushed. It just, for the most part, it just feels like it flies by at 100 miles an hour, which is kind of like how the production was for this movie. They were just moving at Mach 10. And that's how this movie's pace feels. They just feel like they never give you any time to breathe, especially in the first act and a majority of the second act. This movie just flies by at 100 miles an hour. And that's all I'll say about that. This movie's pace and overall structure feels very rushed. But this will lead me into the next problem that I have. Con number 4 is that this movie is not paced very well. The first act flies by like a million miles an hour. Majority of the second act flies by like a million miles an hour. But after Anguirus is killed, to the point where the planes start fighting Godzilla, this movie drags. Like it's close to a half hour's worth of time where this movie just drags like nobody's business. All the stuff where the characters are living in Hokkaido and talking about this, that, and nothing else, and it almost kind of feels like it's from a different movie. And then when the radio report comes in saying Godzilla has destroyed a Hokkaido fishing ship, like, oh, that's right. Yeah, Godzilla's in this movie. So it doesn't necessarily ruin the movie for me because, again, I do like this movie. But that half hour or so worth of time after Anguirus is killed, it drags like nobody's business. And then after that, the movie kind of picks up. And then, well, yeah, I can somewhat agree with Ryan saying that the finale feels a bit too draggy or like it lasts a little too long. I don't fully agree. I can see why, but that's when the movie picks up quite a bit. But yeah, this movie is not paced very well. I've seen worse, but I've also seen better. May as well just talk about it. Con number 5 is that the special effects are very much so rushed, and they're a massive downgrade from the first movie. There's no real special camera tricks in the first Godzilla movie to make Godzilla look as large as he is. Here, the monsters are shot very plain. And there's the only way that you can know that these are giant monsters is if you keep the first movie in mind. And also, they're in a city toppling over buildings. But if you didn't really know that, you'd almost wouldn't know that these are supposed to be giant monsters. There's a lot of moments where the monsters look like guys in rubber suits on a stage, and the effects overall still are very rushed. They don't feel like they had nearly as much time or tribulation put into the effects like Eiji Tsuburaya was doing with the first film, and that's just because it stems from the problem of being hellaciously rushed. It's almost worse than Son of Kong, in my opinion, which is weird because that movie had 9 months to be made, whereas this had only 3 or 4. But still, it's debatable, like which one is worse, Son of Kong or Godzilla's Revenge. What do you think, Ryan?
Which one is worse for what?
Which one do you think is more rushed? Like, which one do you think feels worse? Son of Kong or Raids Again?
You know what? I would say Son of Kong, but I mean, at the same time, those effects are a lot harder to do, so it shows more. But I honestly think this has a better story, if I'm going to be honest.
Fair enough. So yeah, the special effects, we all know this. that they're very rushed. They're not nearly as meticulously crafted as the first movie, and they don't feel like they had nearly as much time or effort put into them. But again, I still think that they look okay considering this movie's circumstances. So again, I've seen worse. In fact, the Godzilla series will get worse than this later in the series, but for what it is, it doesn't look bad, but they do suffer and they are a massive downgrade from the first movie. And the last con number 6, is as fun as the monster fight is, it's very strangely placed. Though I can't really think of any other place to put the monster fight in the context of the story, and also I kind of do defend that because this was the first time Toho was doing this. You kind of have to ask, well, where else would they do it, and how else would they have done it? And they also are probably thinking the same thing. We don't really know where else to put it. So yeah, I do agree that the monster fight, as cool as it is, killing off Anguirus 45 minutes into this movie, it feels a bit anticlimactic, and you ask yourself, what the hell else are we going to do now? One of the monsters is gone, and then they just focus on Godzilla. It almost feels like Anguirus was thrown in just to make it different. So the monster battle is poorly placed. Again, I don't know where I would put it, and I can't think of any other way to do this movie, but it is poorly placed. But still, overall, I like this movie quite a lot, and I like it way more than most people do. So what are your final thoughts on Godzilla Raids Again?
I think it's a sequel that works well enough. Though there's like a couple things that I think could have been done a little better. Like I said, like Dr. Yamane, that's kind of missed potential. That if they didn't rush it, that's also missed potential. But generally, I think it's fun, and I think it was good in what it experimented with, and it kind of set the stage for the rest of the films and how they would be. So it's arguably as important as the original.
Well, god damn. So my final thoughts on Godzilla Raids Again, kind of reset them, but I'll go into more detail. I think this is also not nearly as much, but I think this is a very important installment of the Godzilla franchise. This establishes continuity, as kind of shaky as it is throughout the Godzilla franchise. But for the Showa series, it establishes some continuity. It establishes some world building. It sort of establishes the tone for future Showa Godzilla movies, but I think that's more established in the next couple of movies in the Godzilla series. But it also establishes monsters and monster fights. See, I do think this movie is more important to the Godzilla series than most give it credit for. And I really do like this movie. I still do consider it to be one of my favorite Godzilla movies. I think it's one of the most underrated installments of the entire franchise. It has its flaws, yes. And could this movie have been better? Maybe. So I guess I'll kind of try to give you my thoughts, kind of like I did with Son of Kong, what I would have done if I was to make this movie a little bit better. First off, I understand why Toho did it, because they stated that they wanted to keep the momentum going from the first movie, and that's why this movie was so rushed. I would have let the first movie simmer for about a year or so, and then I would have returned back to give. I wouldn't have brought back Ishiro Honda. I would have kept Motoyoshi Oda, and I would have kept him as the director, because I would have wanted to give another director a crack at making the Godzilla series. But I would have brought back Eiji Tsuburaya to, of course, do the effects. Maybe I would have had a mix of Akira Ifukube and Masaru Sato do the score for this film, but I also would have kept the quiet moments. I would have kind of had the structure be more the same, but what I would have established is I would have made it very clear that Japan is shocked beyond all belief that another Godzilla has returned. And I would have made his return have a bigger impact on Japanese society. I also would have made it be a shock that there's more than one type of giant monster to be resurrected by hydrogen bombs, of course, with Anguirus, because that's another thing I'll say about Anguirus. He doesn't have an impact on the Japanese society almost at all. They kind of acknowledge him at the beginning, but during the final monster fight and after Anguirus is killed, it's just like he's completely forgotten. So I would have changed that, and I would have had the characters ask questions. If Godzilla's still roaming around, we also have Anguirus. What the hell else is out there? Which what they kind of would have established on in the third Bride of Godzilla, but that never came to be. Yeah, I just would have added more fluff, and I would have added more significance, and I would have made this completely Godzilla-centric. I wouldn't have had the oxygen destroyer subplot, and I wouldn't have had the love triangle subplot. I would have just added more fluff to this movie to further showcase Godzilla and Anguirus' impact on Japanese society. And I also would have moved the second monster fight more to the end of the film. Like, I would have had Godzilla go on another little rampage, and I would have had Anguirus go on his own rampage to establish himself as a threat, too. So then I would have had the monsters fight. Godzilla kills Anguirus. Then they, not too much longer later, they stumble across Godzilla on a separate island. And that's when they notice that, he's in an icy area, and they would have gotten the idea to bury him in the ice. So it kept the ending kind of the same. Yeah, that's just what I would have done. Not too much of a difference. I just would have added more fluff to increase Godzilla and Anguirus' significance to the story. So yeah, again, I love this movie. It's one of my favorite Godzilla films, and I consider it to be a vastly underrated both Godzilla movie and monster movie. So what's your final rating for Raids Again, Ryan?
I don't know if this is too high, but I was kind of going back and forth. I'm going to settle at a 7.5 out of 10.
Okay, fair enough.
Just for my pure enjoyment, but there is a couple of things that I'm still wanting from it. I was going between a 7.5 and an 8, so that may change in the future. But as of now, I say 7.5.
All right. So my rating for this movie, I proudly and unabashedly give it this rating. This is going to shock the fuck out of so many people, and it'll turn so many heads. I'm sorry, but I this is just how I feel. I really like this movie. So I'll be giving this a perfect 10 out of 10. Yes, it's got problems, but damn it, I love it. I love this movie so much. So a 10 out of 10 rating. And yes, I do like this more than the original Godzilla. Not going to lie. Hey, art is subjective. So with all that being said, Ryan, you got anything to plug?
Finally was able to record something, so just be on the lookout for that. Probably next week.
All right. Look forward to that. Go and join Jacksonite Productions Official, which is my Facebook group that you can join. And if you have a YouTube channel, you can post videos there and what's the word? Promote yourself and showcase yourself. And if you want to ask questions or post discussion topics or just talk about nerd stuff and geek stuff, go right ahead. I welcome it. You can talk about whatever you want. No politics, no COVID, and no religion. Just talk about nerd stuff and what you love. Look forward to more episodes of Super Kaiju Binge. Next time, we will be discussing, even more so than this movie, another massive experiment piece in Toho's monster movie history with the original Rodan with, I think, Shawnee Boy. Look forward to that. And as always, post your comments down below and let me know what you think. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. Also, go subscribe to Kaiju Network. And as always, go out and if you crash land on an island and you see 2 giant monsters fighting, run. And I will see you guys in the next video.